My name is Emily Carter, and this isn't a fairy tale. It's not one of those stories where the girl meets the boy. They fall in love, and the credits roll with laughter and sunsets. This is a story about a feeling that burned too bright and left ashes that still whisper his name when the night gets quiet. I was 17 when I met him. That age when love feels like a secret miracle and pain is just a word you've heard but never understood. World back then was small. School, home, my best friend Lily, and a heart that believed people meant what they said. His name was Ethan Parker, transfer student. Quiet. The kind of boy who didn't try to be noticed, but somehow everyone saw him anyway. He had this calm about him, like the world could fall apart and he'd still be there, steady, unshaken. The first time I saw him was in the library. He was sitting alone, headphones in, sketching something in his notebook. I remember standing there longer than I should have, pretending to look for a book while my heart tried to memorize his face. He caught me staring, and he smiled. Not one of those fake, practiced smiles. It was small, shy, but real, and just like that, something inside me shifted. I didn't know it then, but that smile was going to ruin me. He joined my English class a week later. We got paired up for a poetry project. Fate, coincidence, I don't know. All I knew was that I could hear my heartbeat every time he leaned over to explain a line from the poem we were analyzing. He didn't talk much, but when he did, every word sounded like he'd thought about it twice. Poems, he said once, are just feelings that don't know where else to go. I laughed nervously. So what are you hiding, Mr. Poet? He smiled again, that same quiet, soul-disarming smile. Maybe one day I'll tell you. We started talking after class about music, about books, about how he liked to draw when it rained, because the world felt softer. He told me his favorite band was Sleeping at Last, and his dream was to study art somewhere far from our town. I didn't tell him, but I'd already started falling. And the scariest part? It didn't feel like falling. It felt like flying. It happened after school, under a gray sky that smelled like rain. We were waiting for the bus, talking about nothing and everything. He reached out to brush a raindrop off my cheek, a tiny, simple gesture that shouldn't have meant anything. But it did. My breath caught. The world blurred. For a second, it felt like time forgot to move. He looked at me, really looked, and said softly, "You're different. Emily. The kind of different that makes people remember you." Nobody had ever said something like that to me before, and I didn't know how to respond. So I just smiled and looked away, hoping he couldn't see how my hands were shaking. That night, I replayed it over and over in my head, every word, every look, every heartbeat. I told myself not to fall. But hearts don't listen to reason, only to rhythm, and mine was already playing his name. Weeks passed. We became inseparable. Though neither of us said what we were feeling, we texted until 2 a.m., sharing secrets we'd never told anyone. He told me about his parents' divorce, about how his dad left when he was 12, about how he'd built walls around himself so high that sometimes even he couldn't climb them. I told him about my insecurities, how I never felt good enough, how I feared people leaving. He replied, "I won't." Simple, direct, dangerous. Because the moment someone promises not to leave, you start believing they'll stay forever. We'd meet after school at the little park behind the old bookstore. He'd sketch. I'd talk. Sometimes he'd draw me, though he'd never let me see the full picture. "Not finished yet," he'd say, smiling. I didn't realize the unfinished drawing was a metaphor for us. It wasn't a grand moment, not fireworks or confessions under the stars. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary, unremarkable. He had a fever that day and skipped school. I couldn't stop worrying. I bought him soup, went to his house after school. His mom let me in. He looked so pale, wrapped in a blanket, eyes half closed. When he saw me, he whispered, "You didn't have to come," I said. "I know." And right then, looking at his tired smile, I realized it. I loved him. Not the dreamy cinematic love, the quiet kind, the kind that sneaks up on you until it's everywhere, in every song, every sky, every heartbeat. He reached for my hand. "Stay," he murmured. So I did. We didn't speak much, just sat there, hands intertwined, letting the silence say everything. That was the moment love stopped being an idea and became something real. Something terrifyingly real. But life doesn't like to give without taking something in return. And love, no matter how pure, always comes with a shadow. The next few weeks were perfect. Too perfect. Looking back, maybe that was the warning. The calm before the storm. I started noticing small changes. The way he'd stare at his phone and go quiet. How he'd avoid questions about his dad suddenly moving back to town. How sometimes, when he looked at me, his eyes seemed to carry a sadness I couldn't name. When I asked if something was wrong, he'd just smile and say, "Everything's fine. Don't worry." But love teaches you to hear the silence between the words. And his silence was screaming. It was a Friday night. The sky was bruised purple. The wind restless. He texted me, "Can we meet? I need to talk." I grabbed my jacket and ran. We met at our spot, the park behind the bookstore. It was raining hard, the kind of rain that makes the world look like it's crying with you. He stood there, drenched, hands shaking slightly. "Ethan, what's wrong?" I asked. He hesitated, eyes flickering like he was fighting himself. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I'm leaving, Emily." I blinked. Leaving? For how long? He looked down. For good. And just like that, the world fell apart. Rain was falling so hard that it felt like the sky itself was grieving with me. His words echoed in my mind, again and again. I'm leaving, Emily, for good. At first, I laughed, because that's what people do when they hear something too painful to be real. You're joking, right? You're not serious. But Ethan didn't smile. His eyes, usually soft and calm, were filled with a kind of sadness that felt older than both of us. I wish I was, he whispered. Why? What happened? He looked away. It's complicated, then uncomplicated. My voice cracked. You can't just leave. Not like this. He stepped closer, brushing a wet strand of hair from my face. I don't want to, but I have to. And that's when I saw it. The fear behind his calm, the pain he was trying to hide. Something was happening, something he wasn't telling me. Please, I begged. Just tell me the truth. He swallowed hard. My dad's sick. It's serious. Mom wants us to move back with him to Chicago. She doesn't want me to stay behind. My chest tightened. But you hate Chicago. You said, I know, he interrupted softly. But it's not about what I want anymore. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him to fight it, to run away with me, to stay. But his eyes told me it was already decided. So instead, I just stood there in the rain, watching as the boy I loved slipped further away with every drop that fell between us. We didn't say goodbye that night. We just stood there, holding each other like maybe if we held on long enough, time would stop. His hands trembled slightly as he whispered, Promise me something. What? Don't forget me. Even if I fade, I wanted to laugh at the irony. Forget him? He was already carved into every heartbeat, every thought, every dream. I could never, I said, and he smiled that small, quiet smile one last time before letting go. That was the night I learned that sometimes love doesn't end with anger or betrayal. Sometimes it ends with silence and the sound of someone walking away in the rain. The next few weeks were a blur. School felt wrong without him. The empty seat beside me in English class was like a wound that refused to heal. Lily tried to comfort. Me. He'll text him, he'll call. Guys like him don't just disappear. But he didn't. No texts, no calls, not even a goodbye message, just silence. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would jump, only to fall again when it wasn't him. I wrote him letters I never sent, pages filled with all the words I never got to say. You said you wouldn't leave. You said I was different, so why does it feel like I never existed? Days turned into weeks, then months, and slowly, painfully, I began to realize something I didn't want to accept, that love can be real and still not be enough. It arrived on a Thursday, a white envelope with my name written in his handwriting, the kind I'd memorized. My hands shook as I opened it. Hey, Em, I don't know how to start this. I've written this letter 100 times, and every version feels wrong. I wanted to call you, but I knew I wouldn't be able to say goodbye without breaking down. Dad's worse than we thought. The doctors say it's spreading fast. Mom's barely holding it together. I'm trying to help her, but I feel like I'm drowning too. I miss you. God, I miss you so much. Every song reminds me of you. Every time it rains, I see you standing there, smiling through the storm. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Em. Please don't hate me for leaving. Ethan! I cried until I couldn't see the words anymore. But the pain that had been suffocating me finally had a shape. It wasn't abandonment. It was heartbreak with purpose. Over the next 2 months, I received 5 more letters, each one softer, sadder than the last. He told me about his dad's treatments, about how the days felt heavy. He said he'd started drawing again. Sketches of the park, the rain, the way I looked when I was lost in thought. And every letter ended the same way. One day, when things get better, I'll come back for you. That sentence became my prayer, my anchor, my reason to wait. And then, nothing. No more letters. No more words. At first, I made excuses. Maybe he was busy. Maybe his dad got better. But deep down, I knew. The silence this time felt different. He wasn't just gone. He was erased, I called. The number didn't work. I wrote one last letter and sent it to his old address. It came back, unopened, stamped in red. Return to sender. That was the day something inside me cracked. Because when love disappears without closure, it doesn't end, it haunts. A year later, I went back to the park, the same one where we first met, where we said goodbye. It hadn't changed. Same old swings, same broken bench, same sky that somehow looked lonelier. I sat there for hours, staring at the spot where he once stood, and I whispered into the wind, I still love you, Ethan. I didn't expect an answer, but the wind shifted, and a single dry leaf landed on my lap. Delicate, fragile, familiar. I looked down. On it, someone had written in faint pencil, "Still here." I don't know if it was fate, coincidence, or just my heart playing tricks on me. But I smiled through my tears, because maybe love never really leaves. It just changes shape. From hands you can hold to memories you carry. Time has a strange way of softening memories without erasing them. 3 years passed, yet Ethan's shadow still followed me like a ghost I didn't want to exorcise. I graduated, went to college in another city, new people, new places, new beginnings. Or at least that's what I told myself. But every night, when the world went quiet, I'd still reach for my phone out of habit, still open the old texts that hadn't disappeared, still read his letters like scripture, tracing the ink with my fingers as if I could touch the past. Everyone said I should move on. But how do you move on from someone who became a part of your soul? It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. I was working at the cafe near campus, serving coffee and pretending my life was normal. Then a boy walked in, tall, with familiar eyes. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, just like Ethan used to. When he handed me the money, I noticed the bracelet on his wrist. It was woven, black thread with a silver charm shaped like a leaf. My breath caught. Ethan had one just like it. I'd made it for him years ago. "Excuse me," I blurted out. "Where did you get that bracelet?" He looked surprised. "Oh, this? My cousin gave it to me." Why I hesitated. "What's your cousin's name?" "Ethan Parker." The world tilted. My vision blurred for a second. "Ethan," I whispered. "Where is he?" The boy frowned. "You knew him?" "Knew him?" My voice trembled. I loved him." The boy's expression softened. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Ethan passed away 2 years ago. Grief doesn't scream. It doesn't announce itself with thunder or tears. Sometimes it just sits quietly in your chest until you realize you can't breathe." I stood there frozen behind the counter as the world blurred around me. The sound of coffee machines, people talking, the smell of cinnamon, all of it faded. The boy, his cousin, kept talking, but I couldn't hear the words. All I could see was Ethan's face, that shy smile, that promise. I won't leave. He had, just not by choice. His cousin's name was Ryan. A few days later, he came back to the cafe and handed me a small, worn notebook. "He wanted you to have this," he said. He made me promise. It was Ethan's sketchbook. Same one he used to carry everywhere, the one he never let me see completely. I took it with shaking hands and opened the first page. Inside were drawings of everything that defined our story, the park bench, the raindrops. My face half turned with a smile he must have memorized from memory. And at the bottom of every page, a date, each one matching the letters he'd sent me. But the last page was different. It wasn't a sketch. It was a letter. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. I wanted to tell you the truth, but I couldn't bear to make you watch me fade." The doctors found it. The same illness my dad had. Genetic. Unforgiving. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to remember me smiling, not sick. I wanted you to have beautiful memories, not hospital rooms and IV drips. I loved you, Em. From the first time I saw you pretending to look for that book in the library. I knew then that my life had just found its meaning. If love could cure, I'd have lived forever. Because you gave me everything. Yours, always, Ethan. The ink was smudged, like he'd cried while writing it. So did I, reading it. For weeks, I walked around in a daze. I'd go to class, smile when people spoke to me, laugh when I was supposed to. But inside, I was drowning. Every night I opened his sketchbook, ran my fingers over his handwriting, and whispered into the dark. You lied, Ethan. You said you wouldn't leave. But deep down, I knew he hadn't lied. He had stayed, in every drawing, every letter, every part of me that still beat because of him. Grief, I learned, doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live with love that no longer has a home. One night, I dreamt of him. He was standing in the park again, wearing the same hoodie, the same gentle smile. I ran to him, crying, "Why didn't you tell me?" He just smiled. "Would you have let me go if I did?" I shook my head. "Never. That's why," he whispered. "You would have stayed, and I couldn't let your life stop for mine." He touched my cheek, warm and soft, so real it hurt. When you love someone, you don't hold them down. You let them fly, and then he faded into light, into silence, into peace. I woke up sobbing, but for the first time, the tears felt lighter, like my heart finally understood what my mind couldn't. A year later, I stood at the park again, this time not to mourn, but to remember. I brought his sketchbook, the one he'd filled with pieces of me, and left it on the bench. Tucked inside was a note of my own. Dear Ethan, I finally understand. Love isn't about holding on. It's about carrying someone inside you, even when they're gone. You taught me that. You taught me how to feel, how to hope, how to heal. I'm not letting you go. I'm just letting you rest. Forever yours. Emily's. I turned to leave. The wind picked up again. The pages of the sketchbook fluttered open, and one leaf, the same kind as before, drifted down and landed on my shoulder. For a moment, I swore I heard his voice, soft, familiar, carried by the breeze. Still here, and this time, instead of crying, I smiled, because he was, always would be. After Ethan's death, time became a slow, heavy thing. Every sunrise felt like an apology from the universe, as if the world kept spinning when mine had stopped. For a long time, I couldn't talk about him. Even saying his name felt like reopening a wound. So I carried him quietly, in my thoughts, in the songs I listened to, in the way I stared too long at the rain. But life has a stubborn way of calling you back. You can ignore it for a while, but eventually it knocks hard enough to break through the silence. One morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't cried in 2 weeks. It felt strange, guilty even, like I was betraying him by not hurting. But that's the thing about healing. It doesn't ask for permission. It just happens, slowly, quietly, until you realize pain has turned into something softer. A year later, during my final semester of college, we were assigned a community project. Something creative that could inspire others. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I took Ethan's sketchbook, the one filled with his drawings and our story, and turned it into an art exhibit. I called it Still. Here. Each page was displayed on soft white walls, illuminated by warm lights. Beneath every sketch, I placed a small note, a piece of our story, told through my words. People cried. Some smiled. Strangers left notes on the message board at the exit. Thank you for this. I lost someone too. This made me believe in love again. That day, I realized something powerful. Ethan's story wasn't just ours anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever loved and lost, and still found the strength to keep living. After the exhibit, my art professor, Mrs. Reynolds, pulled me aside. She looked at me with kind, understanding eyes. Emily, she said softly, grief is love that has nowhere to go. You gave it direction. Those words stayed with me. For so long I'd thought moving on meant forgetting, but now I understood. Healing doesn't erase love. It honors it. Every year on Ethan's birthday, I'd write him a letter. Not because I believed he could read them, but because I needed to. Hey you, it's me again. I started teaching art this year. You'd laugh if you saw me standing in front of a classroom, trying to be patient with kids who won't stop doodling on desks. Thank you guys.